Nonna the Gnome by M.K. Denham. Nonna slung her small makeshift backpack onto her back, hardly feeling the weight as there were so few belongings that she could take. She had packed a sweater, a few crackers, a thin blanket, and a warm pair of socks. She wiped a tear from her cheek and took one last look around the little loft she'd called home for 10 years. She would miss it, but most of all she'd miss her parents, Nigel, the horses, and butterscotch. It didn't really bear thinking about, and she shook her head to rid herself of the sadness that was starting to take a firm hold of her mind. She had to leave before someone found her. She resolutely made her way to the ladder and carefully climbed down. Once on the ground, she looked around to make sure nobody was near, and then slunk out into the yard. She saw Butterscotch and the owl at the far side of the yard with their heads together, and she was mildly curious as to what they were doing, but decided that she couldn't linger. The cat would try to talk her out of what she had to do. She quietly ran the length of the yard to the gravel road leading to the farmhouse, all the time chanting to herself, "Please don't see me, please don't see me." She paused every now and then, hiding behind a bush or some other object, to make sure nobody could see her. Once she had made it to the top of the ridge, and she was looking down at the farm. She knew she was safe, and she felt relieved and upset at the same time. With one last glance at her home, her heart aching in her chest, she turned on her heels and headed up the road. She heard a car in the distance and quickly jumped into the ditch to hide. It was the village doctor, obviously coming out to see how Bobby was doing. The wheels passed close to where she was hiding, and she experienced a moment of anxiety, but once the car had passed, she got back on the road and started marching resolutely towards the horizon. It was about an hour later that she reached the outskirts of the village. There were lights shining in windows and smoke winding its way out of many chimneys. She knew that she couldn't go anywhere near the houses, of course, so she had to deviate from her route and head into the deep forest. She wasn't quite sure where she was heading anyway, so she figured the deep forest would be as good a place as any to set up camp. She was a little bit worried about the camp situation, though. It was terribly cold, so cold that she could see her own breath. And of course there was the small matter of the danger of the deep forest. Her father had warned her many times of the perils anyone would face heading into the dense growth of the forest. She distinctly remembered hearing about trolls and wild animals, but what was she to do? She had nowhere else to go. The sound of another car coming her way made the decision for her. She hoisted her backpack up more securely on her back and turned into the forest. It was tough going, with all the dead trees and branches on the ground that she'd have to either walk around or clamber over. And the vegetation was thick, with snow clinging all over it, which didn't help either. She had to sit down on logs and tree stumps at frequent intervals to simply catch her breath. There were noises all around her, and she was very nervous. A rustling noise to her left suddenly made her jump, letting out an involuntary shriek. A dark, furry face looked up from the undergrowth. "Who's there? What's going on?" a muffled voice said. Nonna grabbed her backpack firmly and held it out in front of her. This was an animal she had never seen before, and she wasn't sure whether it would be a friend or a foe. The animal looked at her nearsightedly. He blinked a few times, obviously searching his memory for a match of what kind of animal she was. Then he seemed to remember. His face showed a measure of recognition. "Just a gnome girl, Mr. Animal. Nothing to worry about," she said with a shaky voice. She gave an involuntary shiver as the wind bit her cheeks. The animal shuffled towards her, sniffing the air greedily. His eyes were squinting to see her, and there was a smell about him that made her stomach churn. "A gnome, eh? What are you doing this far into the deep forest? Aren't you a bit young to be on your own?" He was right in front of her now, sniffing her clothes and looking nearsightedly at her. "I ran away from home," Nonna volunteered defiantly. She was trying to discreetly pull the backpack up level to her nose to see if she could block out some of the stench that followed this strange-looking animal. "Anyway, what kind of animal are you?" she asked curiously. The animal looked her up and down with an appraising look. "You don't know what I am? Didn't your parents teach you anything, silly girl?" he asked haughtily. Nonna immediately became very defensive. Nobody was allowed to say mean things about her parents, and she certainly didn't like the sound of silly girl. "There is no time for schoolwork where I live. We have a very busy life working on the farm," she responded tersely. She really didn't see why she should defend her way of life to this animal, but somehow that was what she was doing anyway.
"Well, I'm a badger and I'm perfectly harmless, so no need to look so worried, Gnome. Do you need somewhere to stay for the night? Tomorrow you can walk back home and face the music, as they say."
He started waddling towards a mound by a tree, with a big opening that obviously served as an entrance to his lair. Nonna wasn't terribly happy about the idea of spending the night with such a smelly animal, and she certainly had no intention of going home the next morning, but she had a feeling that he'd keep her safe, so it was probably not a bad idea to stay with him for the night. She thanked him weakly and followed him to his lair.
"Oh, by the way," the badger continued, "you'll be on your own in there largely. I hunt at night, but I'll be close by, so you should be safe."
Nonna was actually quite relieved to hear this. She wasn't sure she could handle a whole night next to this stink bomb. She crawled in through the opening to the badger's lair. Inside it was dark and dank. It smelled pretty bad, but mostly there was a smell of wet earth. There was a pile of bones in one corner, obviously the badger's garbage area. She thought she could see a small animal head on the pile too, and quickly turned her head away. She did not want to know what was in that pile any more than she wanted to see it. She found a dry spot in a corner, spread her blanket out, and arranged her backpack as a pillow. Once she had eaten a couple of the crackers that she had packed, she stretched out on her blanket and yawned. It was still only early evening, but the long walk had taken it all out of her, and she was totally exhausted. With a small "thank you very much" to the badger, who was snuffling around outside, she curled up on her blanket and fell asleep. You can purchase this book by going to www.mkdenham.com/buythebook.htm. Thank you for listening.